Hey, did you know that you can order a pizza from Domino's Pizza with Terraform? Sounds crazy, huh? But it's true. So why don't we learn about Terraform variables and maybe at the end of this we can order a pizza. Let's get started. So as I mentioned, there is a Terraform provider for Domino's Pizza, and you can see it right here in the Terraform registry. And this will be our example for this video as we learn about Terraform variables. So you can see here that in the example usage for this provider, we're given everything here with no variables, which is normal because of course it'll be a lot longer to include a variables file and reference those variables and all that kind of stuff in a README, which is typical in the registry, in the Terraform registry. But anyway, what we'll do is I grab this this example and added variables, which you typically do. So you can see here the provider Domino's first name. We just put in or they just put in the name here, last name, just the text and numbers as you can see without variables. So we will update that. So what you can do is, of course, as usual, in my GitHub repo, you can go ahead and open or create a new code space. I already have one running and we're going to go through that. So you can run everything in GitHub's cloud without having to install anything on your own machine. So I have this code space running, as you can see. And what we're going to cover in this video, we're going to talk about defining and assigning variables, types of variables, input variables, local variables, output variables, validating variables, sensitive variables, and security. We'll also talk about variable precedence and finally some tips and best practices. All right, perfect. So let's get started and let's take a look at our main file here. We'll open it on the side here. Actually, I prefer doing it this way. There we go. We can close this and move things around. Perfect. So now what we can do is take a look at our main file. And as you can see, I've taken that example I showed you in the registry, and instead of hard coding the values for first name, last name, email address, credit card, and so on, I put it all in the form of variables. Now they could be input variables like this one, var.creditcard, or a local variable like this one. And we'll talk about how to reference those variables shortly, but just look here and see that nothing is hard coded, as you can see in the main.tf file. So let's get started and take a look at our variables.tf file. And this is where typically you would define your variables. Now, you can put everything in one big file, so you could take these variable blocks and put them in the main.tf file. Nothing will stop you from doing that. Terraform will understand that. But from a convention perspective and for ease of reading for your fellow co-workers and for yourself later, it's best to move the variables into a dedicated file called variables.tf. Of course, you can name it whatever name you'd like. And in here, we define those variables. You can't use a variable until you actually define it. And you can see here we've defined the variable first name, and you can give it a type string, which is a best practice to do. Give it the type so we know what type this variable is. String is a form of text, basically, and it could be alphanumeric text. So here we can see you can also give it a description, so customer's first name, which is also a good practice to make sure that whoever's using your Terraform code understands what this variable actually is. And here we don't have any defaults because it's not really reasonable to guess the name of the customer who's going to order the pizza, right? So we'll leave it empty to force the user to enter that variable. Same thing with last name, it's type string, phone number, string, street address or street is also a string. And really this is needed as strings based on the documentation and how the provider would look for those variables. That's why we are using those strings. Phone number, street, city, region, postal code, and then here's another type of variable, a Boolean. So we saw a string, now we see a Boolean, and a Boolean is just a true or false variable, right? In this case, whether to order a pizza or not, so we have a default of false, just to make sure that you don't get charged. Credit card doesn't get charged when you're not paying attention. You need to change that, so now you know what you're doing beforehand. There's another type of variable here, a list, and this is a list of strings. So if you're familiar, let's say, with Python, it's similar to a list in Python, or an array. So this is an array or a list of strings for the menu items that we're looking to order. And there is a validation block here that I have commented out. We'll come back to it and see what this validation will do. Then we have another variable, a credit card variable, and it's a map. It's a map of strings. So think of an associate array or a dictionary in Python, where we're going to provide the credit card information. And then there's another property here, sensitive equals true. So this will make sure that the credit card information doesn't get shown in the outputs variable or on the CLI. We'll see later that while this is a welcomed addition to Terraform, still we will see this information in the state file. That's why it's important to secure your state file, know who has access to it. Finally, we have local variables. We talked about input variables. This is another type. This is the local variables. And this is really cool and useful when you want to use statements or expressions and define them as a variable. So for example, first name is var.firstname, so we're referring to a variable within this variable. And last name is var.lastname. That's fine. Where it's useful is email address, where we can use string interpolation to combine multiple variables together. So the email was going to be basically the first name dot last name at company.com, right? So this is very useful. You can't do this with a variable. You can't go here in a variable and say, hey, we're going to define this this email address, for example. Where is it? Email address. Actually, we didn't define it here, but you can't create a new email address and say it's variable dot first name, plus variable dot last name. You can't do that within a variable. You would only be able to do this within a local variable. And finally, you can create an expression. So in this case, we have this conditional expression, which says that if the variable order, which is a Boolean, if you recall, so if this is true, so if somebody wants to order, if it's true, then the should order will evaluate to 1. But if it's false, it will evaluate to 0. So that's a conditional expression. Again, you can do this with local variables. So now we've basically defined our variables, but we haven't really assigned those variables, right? So we don't know what first name is or last name is. If there's a default, then yeah, this is assigned here. So you can assign the variable with a default, that's fine. But for the most part, you want some sort of way to assign those variables. And there are multiple ways of assigning them. And we'll talk about assignment with variable precedence. But for now, I've assigned them in two files. The first file is the terraform.tf-vars file. And again, traditionally, this file, usually you don't push into Git. So you can put some secret values in here. For example, the credit card information, put it here and make sure it's not pushed into Git. If you notice git ignore, terraform.tf-vars is here. So this won't get pushed into Git since it's holding some secret values. So you can see my credit card is a map, which is, again, associate array or a dictionary. Here it's, you got the curly braces, and within it you've got key value pairs. So number is the key, and here's the actual value, CVV, date, postal code, and so on, all definitions of the credit card. So that's the first file we use, terraform.tf-vars. The second file here we're using is more.variables.auto.tf-vars. And here we can define the rest of our variables, the first name, last name, phone number, street, city, region, postal code, and a menu item. And if you notice here, this is a list. So we have our menu item as a list, and we're looking to order a pizza that is Philly and medium, right? These are some of the descriptions that we'll find in the menu order for our pizza. So that looks great. Now let's take a look at the outputs file. And this is where we can output something to the user. So in this case, the output variables, we've got order output and we've got credit card output. The order output takes on the value of data, which is a data block, Domino's menu item, item.matches, and we're going to match all the items that we find. And we give it a description as my order. And the output variable is credit card. It has the value of var.creditcard and a description credit card info. And notice sensitive is true. So we don't really want to show that. What you might think, why are we actually outputting it? Again, you wouldn't be outputting this. I just want to show you what it looks like if you were to try to output this. Okay, so that looks great. Now what we want to do is go ahead and run this. So let's bring up our terminal, and we'll go ahead and run Terraform init and run Terraform plan. Now notice in the Terraform plan, it shows you that we have our order output. So you can see that we've got a number of things that will show up or shows up in the order output. So we've got a list of a medium 12-inch handmade pan Philly cheesesteak. There's a hand-tossed Philly cheesesteak, and then there's a thin Philly cheesesteak, right? And then the credit card, you can see it's a sensitive value. Well, let's narrow this down. Instead of all these three, and you can see, of course, the price $16.99 for all of them. Our team doesn't like or only likes thin crust. So let's go and validate. And as I showed you before, let's make sure that we only allow using or ordering thin crust. So our validation block here, it says contains the var.menu item. As you can see here, it contains thin in the pizza. So you must order a thin pizza crust since it's our team's favorite. That's the error message if the condition is violated. So let's go ahead and rerun Terraform plan. And now let's see what happens. Oh, we get an error. Okay, invalid value for variable. And then it gives you must order a thin pizza crust since it's our team's favorite, right? And it gives you the validation rule that errored out here. So let's go back and make sure that we order a thin pizza, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Let's run Terraform plan once again. And it works. Now we're only down to one kind of pizza, and this is the thin Philly cheesesteak pizza that we're gonna order. So we can of course go ahead and run Terraform plan, Terraform apply, and be careful because this will order a pizza for you. So if you did put your credit card, yeah, a pizza will show up at your door basically. So be careful. So this is the Terraform apply. It is it's done. As you can see, the credit card output is sensitive, so it's not going to show up here. But if you do go to the terraform.tf state file and look at the credit card information, it's all here. So your credit card will show up in the state file. That's why you got to make sure that any sensitive information in your Terraform files or variables are going to show up in your state file, even if you mark them as sensitive. Okay, so that's a very key thing to notice. Now, I didn't get to show you the main.tf file, and that's important because I want to show you basically, let's pull this on the other side. I want to show you how we reference these variables, which is very important. So if we pull up our, let's see, terraform.tf vars, for example, where we define or assign our credit card, you can see here that in the provider Domino's, it asks for the credit card, and here we're assigning or getting or referencing the credit card using the var keyword dot and then the credit card variable. So it's basically going to grab this information and put it here for our provider. We also are referencing the first name, last name, email address, phone number using the local variable. And if you recall, the local variable was down here, and this is the definition of the local variable, but we actually assign the variables of the local variable from here. So the first name is grabbing the first name variable, which was found in the more variables.auto.tf vars, which is Sam, last name is Gabriel, and the phone number and street and everything else. That is getting pulled into the local variable called customer info. So the way you reference this, first name will be local, singular. You can see here locals is plural, but referencing it is local singular dot. So we're using the dot notation, customer info, which is this variable name, dot the first name, which is contained in this map. Okay, so that's how we're getting the first name. Similarly, we're getting last name and email address, and also phone number. So that's how we're referencing those local variables. In the data block here, which basically we're grabbing the address, so we are referencing the street, city, region, postal code, just simply with the variable blocks or the variable reference var.street, city, region, postal code. The Domino's store, you can see here, we are grabbing the address URL object just by referencing the actual data block up here. So we're not really adding a variable, we're just referencing the data block from here. The data Domino's menu item, we can see here that we're referencing the Domino's store here for the store ID, and the query string is the var menu item, which we saw right here, the one that we made sure that thin is part of the list, so that we get, or we query a string with that with a specific pizza that we're interested in. And then finally, what actually orders the pizza is the resource block, Domino's order. And as you can see here, I have count, local should order, and local should order is defined as 1 or 0 depending on the variable order. So in our case, since order by default is false, the should order is 0 and count is 0, meaning that we're not going to create a resource in this case. Okay, so that's why no resources were created when we ran Terraform apply, because I don't want to order a pizza right now. So then you got the API objects, store ID, item codes. These are all, again, referencing the different data blocks that we have up here, which will make everything work and get you to order your pizza. So is it lunchtime? Well, maybe you can use this to go order a Domino's pizza. Hopefully this has been a tutorial that helps you understand a little bit more about variables and how to use them in Terraform. Before I forget, make sure that you take a look at these variable precedents and tips and best practices, and I'll go over them very quickly. Variable precedents, there are many ways of assigning variables. The precedence means that if you assign a variable using an environment variable, so if you go and export tf underscore var underscore your variable name, like first name or last name, then Terraform will grab this as, you know, the actual variable itself. Even if you've defined it again in a terraform.tfvars file, this will take precedence over this. The second way is terraform.tfvars or terraform.tfvars.json comes in third. Any auto.tfvars or auto.tfvars.json comes in next, and it's processed in lexical order for their file names. We saw the more variables.auto.tfvars here. Then you can also assign variables via the command line, which is helpful in many cases when you're running a pipeline. So you can just run terraform plan -var and the variable name, or terraform apply -var and the variable name, or -var file and reference a file that might not necessarily be in the .tf format. And then finally, if none of these matches, then variable defaults will take over. And if you didn't put a variable default, the user is going to end up getting a prompt saying, well, I couldn't figure out what your variable assignment is. Just enter it on the command line, and then you have to enter it with a prompt, which typically people don't use because you're running this as part of a pipeline maybe. So you would define it in another way. Now, tips and best practices. Number one, use a consistent naming convention for variables. I can't stress this enough. Use something that you will recognize in the future, or somebody else you're working with will recognize, and also provide a description for that variable that helps the user understand what this variable does. And then number two, store variable declarations in a separate variables.tf file. Don't put all your variable blocks in the main.tf, separate those. Then number three, use reasonable default values for optional variables, right? So as we did with the order variable, we put a default of false. So it's helpful to add some reasonable defaults. Number four, consider using local variables and built-in functions to simplify your configuration, perform some complex operations similar to the locals that we created here. Now, don't go overboard with this and make it too complex that it's harder to understand and read. There's always a fine line and a balance that you can aim to achieve. Number 5, use validation rules to enforce constraints on variable values. So that's also helpful if you want to help the user along and make sure that they're within some guardrails. Number 6, mark sensitive variables as such to prevent accidental exposure. So we just want to make sure that we're being safe when we're running this code with any sensitive variables. Number 7, consider using a Terraform automation collaboration software, or TACOS for short. Env0 is a great option, and this will help you secure those variables. They'll be encrypted at rest, and also will secure your backend, your Terraform state file that I mentioned before. So that needs to be secure. You need to have RBAC around it, and you need to have it encrypted at rest once again, and in a central location where you can collaborate with multiple co-workers as well. Well, hopefully this has been helpful for you. And once again, go out there and order a pizza, and I will see you in the next video.